CSCA Partnership for Education and Training. My name is Tim. I'll be your host for the webinar. Our facilitator today will be Eleonora Morel.
Hello.
At this point, oh, sorry, she just said
Hello.
hi.
Yep, that's fine.
At this point, I'm going to mute everyone's phones to keep background noise to a minimum. If you have any questions, you can click on the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. It's an icon with a hand in the air. Once it's called on, I can unmute your microphone. You can also, at any time, let us know in the text chat area at the bottom right, and we'll answer your question directly in the text chat. I'd like everybody to go ahead and practice raising their hand right now. So if you can go ahead and hit that raise hand button that's at the bottom of the screen. There's all the hands going up. And then to put your hand down, you just hit the button again. So go ahead and put your hand down. Very good. Look at that. We have a good group today. So once again, you can also let us know if you have any questions at the chat panel. If the chat box isn't open, just click on the chat where it says chat, the button. Make sure everyone is selected in the send to area, and then please type your thoughts in the chat box and hit enter. So as I said earlier, today's webinar is sponsored by the New York State and CSCA Partnership for Education and Training. As many people refer to us, we're called the Partnership. Some of you may be wondering, what is the partnership exactly? Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, the partnership is an organization that administers education and training programs to CSCA represented employees through labor management cooperation. It is funded through negotiated agreements between New York State and CSCA. The partnership offers in-person classroom training, online learning, educational advisement services, grants, tuition benefits, labor management services, and other education and training programs, including the webinar you are attending today. The partnership is a I'd like to turn your presentation over to your facilitator, Eleonora.
Thank you, Tim. I'm glad to be here. Welcome, everyone. As Tim said, my name is Eleonora Morel, and I've been using PowerPoint for, I'd say over 30 years. I've presented and I've created a number of courses on effective presentation, so I'm really excited to be here today. And over the next hour, we'll explore how to design powerful and dynamic presentations. To start us off, I'd like to get a sense of your experience with designing presentations. Please take a moment to answer our first polling question.
So go ahead and let us know in the text chat area. Describe your experience with designing presentations. A, never designed a presentation. B, designed once or twice. Or C, designed frequently. So let us know there. It's A, B, C. Coming in wildly.
Yeah. Fine, once or twice, a long time ago. A little more than that, but
Both
not
C's, a
too.
couple of A's, but mostly B's.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, thanks for sharing with us. Those are some great comments. Okay. In this webinar, we will help you identify useful planning strategies so you can build a strong presentation. At the end of this session, you will be better able to recognize principles of good design. We will show you how to add text and graphic images to create visually appealing slides. And finally, you will see a range of methods to test your presentation before it is shown to an audience. Most of us use Microsoft PowerPoint to design presentations, and while we'll touch on a few features of that particular program, it is important to note that the strategies and principles you will learn about today could be applied in any presentation software program such as Prezi or SlideShare. Also, this course focuses solely on designing and not presentation. If you're interested in becoming a better presenter, we suggest you check out OER's Powerful Presentations course. We've all experienced boring presentations or death by PowerPoint. We've walked away thinking about how this has wasted our time and even bored us to tears. Yep, I've been there. I'm curious, what do you think of when you hear the phrase death by PowerPoint? I'd like you to type your thoughts in the chat box.
So please type your ideas about what makes a presentation fall into the death by PowerPoint category. Let us know that in the chat box. Once again, the chat box at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. If it isn't open, please click on the chat button. Once the chat is open, just make sure everyone is selected in the Send To area so we can all see your thoughts. So go ahead and let us know in the chat box area, what do you think of when you hear the phrase death by PowerPoint?
I think this slide says it all, and it's one of our theories here. You don't even need the words on the slide.
Boring is the number one
Yeah, boring.
response.
Too much text than you can read. Boring, boring, boring. So yeah, look at these poor people at this presentation. They're falling asleep, and the presenter, what's going on? And you're boring. So thanks. Thanks for sharing. This webinar will provide you with proven methods, tools, and techniques you can use to develop interesting and engaging presentations. As you can see, the subjects that we will be covering today, what we need to do to plan and prepare for a presentation, best how to best design your presentation, and finally, how to test your presentation. I'd like to draw your attention to this particular slide for a moment. We created it as a tool to help the audience understand what the main topics for our presentation will be. As you'll see in a moment, it will also act as a kind of roadmap. You should begin the planning process by making sure you clearly understand the purpose or goal of the presentation. If you won't be the presenter, it's important that you ask that person the same questions about the purpose of the presentation. Why do you think it's important to know the goal of your presentation before you start designing it?
So please type in the chat box any reasons you can think of why it might be a good idea to know the goal of the presentation before designing it. So in that chat box, which we've been using, once again, let us know why you think it might be a good idea to know the goal of the presentation before designing it. Let's give everybody a moment. This is a long question.
Focus, focus. Good, good. Focused, stay on task, know what info to present, know home points, focused, yeah. Perfect. Direct info on the slide. Get to the point. Yep, good. Focus, good. I like it, yeah. Okay, kept coming up. Focus, get to the point, focus, get to the point, yep. So those are all good ideas, and thanks for sharing. And I agree, if we don't know the goal or purpose of the presentation, then how can we choose the main or supporting ideas to include in it? This purpose should be the glue that holds all of the slides together. It's your job to make this purpose clear to the audience right from the beginning. If you don't, you'll soon have people thinking, get to the point, like you guys said. And if you adopt that get to the point mindset throughout the presentation, you will eliminate a lot of clutter and unnecessary words that plague many slides. And while we're considering what the audience wants, let's figure out who they are. Understanding your audience is a good way to help you plan your presentation. So make sure that you find out answers to the experts or people with limited backgrounds on this topic, whatever your topic is. The more you know about your audience, the better you will be able to tailor your presentation to meet your objectives and their needs. As you develop the presentation, it is essential that you match the number of topics you cover with the amount of time you'll be given. To take the guesswork out of this audience, rehearse the presentation and time it. The simplest way to do this is to read presentation out loud and time it with a clock or stopwatch. Remember to add some room for questions from your audience. And while we're talking about planning, find out how much time you'll be given to create the presentation. Honestly, a good presentation takes longer to design than a bad one, and I can speak that from experience on that one. So make sure you have enough lead time to do this well. It can take a lot longer than you think. Another item on your presentation list is to find out as much as you can about the room where your presentation will be displayed. Try to find out what you can about the size of the room, how light or dark the room will be, and how close the screen is from the audience. The size of the room or screen may determine how you set up your backgrounds, text size, and styling. For example, if the room is long or deep or the screen is small, you may need to create slides that someone in the last row can easily see and read. The same applies for presentations that will be seen on a computer screen. What will be the easiest to view? Now that you've considered the design requirements for your physical location, you can begin planning your content. If you're developing a presentation for someone else, you should ask them for an outline of items that should be covered. The outline should identify the main ideas of the presentation. It's also a good idea to limit the number of topics you are going to discuss to around 3 or so. When you start planning, you may have too many ideas for the length of your presentation. I'm curious, if you're working alone, how would you go about narrowing your ideas and selecting the most important ones to cover in the presentation?
Please type in the chat box the methods you use to determine what the most important points of a presentation are. So if you're working alone, how do you go about narrowing down your ideas? This is a long question too.
What are some techniques? Yeah, what do you want them to remember? Make a bullet list, make an outline and decide. Yep, yep. Good. Create an outline. Make a list. Yep, yep, yep. So maybe, yep, outline, identify key points. So yeah, maybe a combination of, you might brainstorm a little bit, throw out like a lot of ideas out there, and then just like everybody's saying, you're going to narrow that down to a list that's something more manageable. So you might use lots of brainstorming and then narrow it down to a list. So you guys got it. Yep. So thanks. Yep, and working with coworkers is a good one too. We finished our planning. So now we are ready to start designing our presentation. In this section, we'll be discussing best practices for designing good slides. These best practices are not based on our personal preferences, but rather are grounded on scholarly research that has been conducted over the past several years. Many of these things may seem like common sense, others may surprise you. Let's start by looking at some basic or general principles that should guide you as you develop. Tell me what you think about the previous slide. Did you feel that it was well designed, or does it need to be improved?
So go ahead and let us know in the text chat area. What do you think about the previous slide? A, well designed, B, not great but okay, or C, needs a lot of improvement. So A, well designed, B, not great but okay, C, needs a lot of improvement. A mix of B's and C's,
Yeah.
not one A, so that tells us
Yeah. Yeah.
nobody thinks it's a good slide.
Excellent. I don't think it's a very good slide at all. It's horrible. Yes. So either A, B, or C. It's not great, but it could definitely be improved. I might go with C, that it needs a lot of improvement because there's way too much text. So all of it, many of you said it needs work one way or another. It needs some help. So I think that this slide is better. It's a bit prettier, but the most important thing is that we now have short statements that are quick to read. None of the original thoughts will be lost. However, each of these short statements will be supported by an explanation from the speaker. The important thing is that the audience will be able to quickly scan the slide and understand the points you're trying to make. Let's review this principle in greater detail. The first principle is keep it simple. Let's start with keep it simple. The information is all here, but let's stop for a moment to take a closer look at this slide. It's not bad, but it can still be improved. These 4 ideas are the topics I want to cover. They are short statements, but quite a few of them on one slide. Since I'm going to review each of these points individually anyway, why not break each of them into a single slide to produce even more simplicity? Research shows that breaking them up into separate slides is helpful. If I split them up, people won't be reading ahead to the next idea and not listening to me as I discuss the current idea. And splitting them up into different slides won't add any more time to the presentation. Here's the first basic keep it simple design principle, but shown on its own slide. Less is best. Some of the most interesting presentations use slides that have very limited amount of text and graphics. This slide is used to reinforce what the presenter is trying to say in a quick to grasp manner without any distractions. So the key to building simplicity into a presentation is less is best.
Well, Marcy has her hand up. If you have a question, Marcy, go ahead. I unmuted you, or you can let us know in the text chat area.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you could just put your hand down. I think Marcy put her hand down. No problem,
She says,
Marcy.
she says, oops, no,
Hey,
I didn't raise my hand.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Just try and make sure we don't miss anybody if they have a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, and please ask away. Do you think you can hold 3 ideas in Do you think people can hold 3 ideas in their head while you are covering a slide? If you do, please raise your hand.
So if you think people can hold 3 ideas in their head, go ahead and click that raise hand button for me.
Remember, our first slide had 4 ideas on it.
Well, we only have about a little less than third of the people raising their hand.
Okay, good. And we got some people in the chat saying not well, not efficiently. So yeah. So I think people might remember 3 ideas at a time if you were going to use a bullet point. But I wouldn't add any more than that on slide to 3 as well, so you don't overwhelm people. Remember, the more information you add to a slide, the more likely it is that your audience will lose track of your message. A great rule to remember, and our third simplicity design principle, is that your audience should be able to read and comprehend your slide in 10 seconds. What do you think of that slide? I think you got it in less than 10 seconds. If it takes too long to read or understand a slide, the audience will keep trying to figure it out and will ignore what the presenter is saying. Slides are designed to support the spoken presentation, not compete with it or distract from it. So give your audience something they can scan in 10 seconds and they'll quickly have their attention back on the presenter. The next simplicity strategy is that when you are developing slides, consider leaving white space around your text or images. The empty space has a purpose. Few things that are on the slide. It focuses your attention on it. Too many words and graphics are distracting to the viewer and forces our eyes to wander restlessly around the slide. Our third key design principle is to highlight or emphasize the most important points or information in your presentation. The main points in your presentation should be clearly identified in some way. Many things can be used to draw your audience's attention. We used a gold color in the image and in the text on the slide. During this presentation, you've noticed we've used several different ways to highlight key information. Please type in the chat box one method you've noticed that we've used to emphasize a point other than color.
So other than color, please type in one method that we think you might have noticed that we've emphasized in the presentation today. Let us know that in the chat box. So other than color, to emphasize a key point in the presentation today, what do you think we've done?
Maybe things like limiting to 3 points,
Bold. Bold is a good one.
less is best,
Using text style, size or font, graphics or images,
Graphics or images. So interestingly enough, a lot of people are saying text him, but it's the lack of text that's actually really what's important in this one. We've used white space and we've used images to really, um, we've used simplicity. We've limited things to just 3 points per slide or a single information on a slide. So while the text is there, right, it's very limited text. So I agree with people saying we have used text for emphasis, but it's the lack of text that I think you're picking up on. Yep. So, yep, there you go. Perfect. Yes, exactly. So now that we've completed our review of basic design principles, let's spend some time talking about text and describing some best practices for its use. On the slide, you can see the points I want to make next. Okay. As we did earlier with our Keep It Simple slide, let's demonstrate the first best practice, one idea per slide. I'm going to break each of these 3 bullet points into separate slides. By doing this, I'm able to keep you focused on only one point being discussed and keep our design principle of simplicity. We've also eliminated one more boring slide with bullets. Bullets are so boring. This is a great slide. Notice that when I use one idea on each slide, I have room to build valuable white space around your text and to give it that clean, uncluttered, professional look. And if you do that, you'll also have room for a single dominant image. I do have to say, when you design slides with minimal text, which research supports, the presenter will need to do their homework and prepare better for the presentation. After all, not all the words will be on the screen. In fact, none of them may be on the screen. It's all in the presenter's script. So you have to have a really good script and know your information inside and out. The next tip for using text is to choose an appropriate font style and sizes. While the fonts shown here are nice looking, most people find them more difficult to read, especially at a distance. It's best to avoid too many different fonts throughout your presentation, so pick 1 or 2 fonts and stick with them. And we typically say you stick with the sans serif typefaces, so something like Helvetica or Calibri, or the ones without all the little hooks and crooks on the letters. And speaking of speaking of visibility, make sure the words on your slides are large enough so that they can be easily read from the back of the room. I love this slide. As a general rule, use a minimum of 40-point size for headings and titles and 28-point size for body text. For those of you sitting at a computer screen in this webinar, 28 may seem large, but in a big well-lit room, anything less than 28 may be hard to read. If you find that you can't fit all of your text on the screen at size 28, you're probably using too many words. Are there any questions about what we've covered so far?
So let's take a moment and pause and see if we have any questions. Let us know.
But I go back, Tim, to say, what is the use of this slide without all my note? There's nothing on the slides. It's everything we're talking about is what's important. So even if I give you the slide deck, if you, I know there's handouts. So Tim and Heather sent out some really great handouts in addition to the slide deck. But just for you to remember, a lot of times, the slide deck only has a few keywords on it. So, but the images are great. So I think they are really helpful. So,
I think there were 2 handouts with this class that went with the
yep.
slides. Once again, you can go back to that confirmation email. You would have got that from Heather Romano here at the partnership, and it has the handouts and the slides.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Tim. So let's do an exercise to practice limiting the amount of words on a slide. Let's look at the first line of this slide together. Look to eliminate as many unnecessary words as possible. If I were to reduce this line, what might it be? There's no need to use the whole sentence. So perhaps we could narrow it down or cut it down. Eliminate unnecessary words would work. Yep, eliminate words. Okay, great. So Tim's kind of crossed off some stuff for us. Okay, so that's the one we did together. Now, okay, now it's time for you to try it on your own. Take a look at the second line and then use the chat box to suggest a shorter way to say, try to keep the number of words used to 6 or less. There's no perfect way to do this, so just go ahead and give it a shot.
So let us know in the text chat area there, how would you shorten the second sentence? Words would we get rid of? So everybody's saying we'll use 6 words, so we got that down.
Yep,
Which,
but also,
which
yeah, go ahead, Tim.
just going to say which words specifically, which should we maybe get rid of?
Yep. But yeah, and so also notice the title of the slide. The slide title is keywords. So we don't need to necessarily have to repeat the word words. So we could say, you know, so the title of the slide is keywords. So bullet number 1 is eliminate unnecessary, and then 6 or less. Those would be 2. You could get rid of it. So those would be 2 ways to do that. So we could do for bullet number 2, or for number 2, we could just do 6 or less because we know the title of the slide is already keywords. When, and we're going to tell the audience, it's going to say on the slide 6 or less, we're going to tell the audience, hey, you need to keep your slides, the bullets in your list to 6 or less and even shorter. So we don't even have to, we might not even have to put the word keep in there. So just keywords, eliminate unnecessary, and then 6 or less. So there you go. But those are all great ideas. So you could see how you can really cut the number of the text down. The last category of design principles that we'll be discussing involves the best use of graphic images. If you're wondering why pictures can be more powerful than words, take a look at this image. I doubt that any of you would think that the sign on the right with the text is easier to grasp than the sign with the car. It would certainly be easier to understand the car road sign at 55 miles per hour. Research shows that we are more likely to remember an image rather than words. That's good since we certainly want our audience to remember our message. As I mentioned, that research has found people remember pictures better than text, but we remember things even better when we use graphics and a small amount of text like a title. The hardest thing for people to remember is words alone. So if you want your audience to remember your idea, combine a title with an image. Having said that, your image does need to be related to the words on the screen. If it isn't, your audience may become confused and miss your message altogether. Dancing baby. Why do we have a dancing baby? One more tip. It's usually best to use one large image rather than several small images. Using several images can dilute the impact of your message and possibly make it harder to understand. Take a look at this slide. Do you think you know what it's saying? Is the meaning clear? Yes or no?
So please tell us whether you know what this slide is saying in the chat box. Is the message clear?
Ah, don't be late. Don't stop. Carry your briefcase. Run, run, run. What's it saying?
The
Stop, don't
no's are
run.
coming in fast and
Yeah,
furious,
yeah,
Elliot.
I see that. Yeah. Yeah. Don't rush, but then stop, right? It's confusing, contradicting. So yeah, it's not obvious at all. So why doesn't it work? So why doesn't it work? Um, as I mentioned a moment ago, a graphics can help make your message more clear. However, if you choose the wrong graphic or that is an image that doesn't support your idea, you can confuse your audience, right? There's two opposite concepts in this slide. Also, there's just too much going on this slide. There are too many images, and an overall confusing message. Something like this grabs the audience attention, but it also pulls it away from what the presenter is saying as people try to figure it out. Ask yourself as you create each slide, what's the point of the slide? How does it support my main idea? Is there anything on the slide that will detract from my message? This slide describes the problem of hunger as reported by the Feeding America website. These are striking numbers, but they may get lost in those bullet points. Let's use graphics and best practices for text to improve the impact of this slide. The graphic here has a strong relationship to the text. To make the slide even better, we used keywords and numbers in an infographic style to make the data more visually interesting. Overall, the text and graphics together make a more powerful statement. Do you think that we could make this better though? Raise your hand if you think we can.
So go ahead and raise your hand if you think we can make this graphic, the slide a little better.
Okay, yep.
Looks like we're running just short of 50% of hands.
Okay, it's a good slide. It's better than just those bullet points. So don't, so that's a good thing. But we could even improve the slide by splitting it into several slides, using one idea of or piece of data per slide. We could also remove the image, the faded image of the soda and burger. It may be a distraction from our main point. Yeah, but break it down. Right, exactly. Yep. There you go. Great job, guys. The next best practice is to use graphics that don't distract from your audience. We know that using a large graphic is a great way to engage your audience. However, an image that overwhelms the message or steers the viewer away from the point being made is counterproductive. So choose wisely. And when in doubt, don't. Sometimes the text alone will work best. Love this slide. While this photo certainly gets the message across, it may be too distracting. You might spend more time looking at the image and not paying attention to what the speaker is saying. This photo gets the same message across, but in a less distracting way. Our third best practice for graphics is to use graphics that create emotions in the viewer. Scientists have found that we are more likely to remember information that is associated with an emotion. That's one reason why stories can work so well in a presentation. You can almost feel the pain on this woman's face, and it beautifully supports the text on the screen. Most of us probably would want to do anything possible to prevent the suffering depicted on the face of this child. Poor little thing, she got a bad cold. But graphics can be counterproductive too. Some parents would avoid immunization if they thought it would bring pain and suffering to their child. If your graphics suggest that, it may be working against your desired goal. So we want to bring in emotion, but we don't want to bring in fear, pain, stress, things like that. In any business environment, the use of charts and graphs is inevitable. Finding a way to report numbers in simplified ways that are visually appealing is worth the effort. The audience can better understand the points being made. But do not put overly complex diagrams or charts in your slides. The audience won't be able to read them anyway. Instead, print them out as handouts. I always love this, Tim, when people put an Excel spreadsheet on a slide and like, you can't read it. So just hand it out, give it to them. In this example, the presenter used an arrow to try to draw the audience's attention to the highest spending area in this report. That helped a little. However, I think anyone would have a hard time following this chart. Yes, one of our people says, I've sat through too many of these, I know, right? So a chart might help better. Let's say that we wanted to focus on just the education spending. If that were the case, this chart would be better. Having said that, 3D charts often look nice, but are actually harder to understand. You don't know whether the front or the back of the bar is the side we should look at for the numbers on the left. For example, the red bar on the left represents 35,050, but it doesn't really look like that. This chart is easier to grasp quickly. It's a 2D chart now, and it may not be as pretty, but it has more descriptive title and simpler data labels on the bottom. Yeah, charts need to be self-explanatory. Great comments. Have any of you used SmartArt before in PowerPoint? If so, please raise your hand.
So if you've used SmartArt, go ahead and click that raise hand button for us. Let's give everybody a second to raise their hand if they're going to.
Love SmartArt. Oh, it's so much more powerful than a bulleted list.
We have a very small handful of people that have used SmartArt.
Yeah, you could take a bulleted list and just convert it to SmartArt. Such a handy tool. So
Yep,
instead of,
just quite a few though have used it.
yeah,
I mean, a small amount, I
a
should say.
small amount. Yeah, and in the chat I'm seeing no's, lots of no's. So yeah, yeah, this is a process. And instead of doing a bulleted list that says 1, 2, 3, I think this really represents, you know, how to do it with SmartArt. So PowerPoint's SmartArt tool can help bring words and lists to life. You may have noticed that we've used it several times in this webinar. There are dozens of styles to choose from. For example, we could use a list graphic instead of bullet points, or a process graphic to show the steps to complete a task, as we did here. You'll probably need to remove most of the words so that the text in the boxes doesn't get too small. You can also resize the boxes. As with all PowerPoint tools, don't overuse this feature. Used occasionally, it adds interest and variety. Although there's so many different smart arts, if it's appropriate, go ahead and use it. Are there any questions about what we've covered so far before we move on to the next topic?
If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box and we'll get right to you. Or go ahead and raise your hand. Let's just pause a moment and see if anybody has any questions.
And SmartArt lives on the ribbon in PowerPoint. So it's also under Insert on the Insert tab in the ribbon, and you'll see SmartArt there.
All right, no hands going up, nothing in the chat box.
Okay. All right. So, okay, we'll move on to our next topic. Our last topic covers the best ways to test your presentation before you deliver it to a live audience. Another good graphic with a slide. Now that you've finished creating your presentation, it's time for a test drive. Don't show your presentation to your audience without first making sure you have a road-ready product. Take the following steps to ensure your work is polished and runs smoothly. That's not how you spell always, Tim? First, use spell check to make sure all words are spelled correctly. After all, your presentation will be projected to the audience and the critics are watching. Having said that, you should still have someone proofread your text, because you could have things like homonyms, words that sound the same. You maybe misspelled somebody's name or some special terminology that spell check won't check, so you should always have somebody reread it, especially if you only have few words on a slide. We spelled the word presentation wrong here, Tim, it would be not good. The true test is to run the entire presentation from the beginning to be sure that all goes as planned. Put yourself in the audience's seat and review it with a critical eye. Next, review your text. Look for text that may be blocked by images or washed out by the background. Is there plenty of white space? Were you consistent with the type and fonts used? We have a nice white background and the black text stands out against it. So always make sure there's enough contrast as well. Next, review your image. Does your image show well in the delivery mode you'll be using? Are they blurry or pixelated when they are on a big screen? Finally, do the images you chose reinforce your message, or are they decorative? So maybe we've all seen that. So this image is blurry, but it's there for a reason to show it's not clear. But there's nothing like, I've seen it many, many times. I'm sure you have too. People use images on a slide, they're very blurry, or they resize it and it becomes very pixelated and you can't even figure out what they're trying to show you. So just instead of doing that, just don't use it. Figure out another way to do it. Okay, it's time for a test. Take a look at this slide and let me know what you could do to improve it in the chat box.
So like Eleanor said, this is our test for the end of our class here that we're coming.
Yep, limit words, break up into
Less
multiple
words,
slides. Yeah, one idea per slide, reduce the words.
maybe some color.
Yep, eliminate the words. Too many words, needs graphics. Yes, less words, and split it up. Those smart
Ooh,
art could
somebody
be a
wants
way
to
to
use
do.
smart art.
Good, yeah. 3 individual slides with less words, perfect. Yep. Yeah, use at least one graphic, but in this case, we would have to split it up into multiple. Yeah, we definitely want to use some graphics, but we definitely also want to eliminate the words because if we have too many words and a graphic, it's going to get too confusing. Highlight the important points. And to do that, to highlight the important points, we're going to get rid of the words and add some graphics and, right, add more slides. So split it up. Yep, you guys got it. All right. So thanks for sharing your ideas. Today we've covered many of the things that you can do to avoid death by PowerPoint. So think back to that first slide when everybody's falling asleep. Nobody's falling asleep. And to make your presentation more interesting, we discussed what you can do to prepare for a presentation, how to design interesting slides, and then how to test your presentation so when you present it, it looks as good as it can. PowerPoint has a great tool in it called Rehearse, and it actually times you. So that's another great tool in PowerPoint. As you begin preparing your next PowerPoint presentation, review